to bring me happy. Thank you, happy.
Welcome aboard! This is a Captain's Log, spanning all things Star Trek from 1960s Star Trek to today's Trek. I'm Brian Kreutz.
And I'm Lili Fox-Lim. The sci-fi franchise Star Trek has ventured far and wide over its many decades, years before you and I came to being on Earth, BK. With over 800 episodes of space-based adventure logged, we know you love it, and we all love it. And why not take you back to the very beginning in The Cage, then into the first season of the original series. This week we have Carey Foster, a woman whose wisdom and grace will take us to the beginning.
That's right, Lily. Gene Roddenberry is standing beside an Orion serving girl from The Cage going over a script in 1964. Now, that serving girl is Carey Foster, and this was not her first time she was working with Gene Roddenberry. In fact, her parents were neighbors and good friends of Gene and his first wife, Eileen Roddenberry. During the time, he worked for the LAPD and began his career as a television writer. Carey was there in the beginning of Star Trek, landing the role in The Cage, and later, multiple episodes of Star Trek, the original series, as Lily just alluded to. So many stellar Star Trek stories she has to tell coming up.
Oh, I can't wait for this interview. So Carey not only sported the super sleek scant miniskirt, she was also filmed in a deleted scene from The Cage. Wow, this will be an interview forming the literal beginnings of family and FaceTime in Star Trek as one of the first actresses. BK, we have some Star Trek news to get to first, my friend.
Absolutely, we do. Star Trek news is revving up for a faster warp speed of production. We just informed you last week another new season, number 3, was announced for Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Well, the release date for season 2 premieres June 15th on Paramount Plus. Now, keep in mind, there's a new Academy Award nominee named Carol Kane who will join season 2 with a recurring role as the chief engineer. Her name is Pelia, and she's taking over for Hemmer.
Ooh. Well, BK, more good news here on our Star Trek news segment. Star Trek Lower Decks Season 4 sets a summer release window late in 2023 to beam aboard with Beckett and Boymes. The adult animated series also received a renewal for Season 5. Oh, BK, if only you and I could further our dream of trekking from this talk show ship to guest voicing on Lower Decks.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And Trekkies, if Lily and I did appear on Lower Decks, this is what we would likely look like as Lower Deckers. Have a look. Thank you, Lily, for dreaming big.
Of course.
We'll have to ask Mike McMahon to come on our show to discuss all things Lower Decks and just maybe a dream come true for you.
For us.
Yes, absolutely. As Kirk once said, something Spock is fond of saying, there are always possibilities.
A Captain's Log returns in a moment.
Welcome back to A Captain's Log. Brian and I are fortunate to be joined for an interview today with a very familiar face growing up on Star Trek the original series in TV reruns and now streaming. We have Carey Foster joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Lily.
Carey, you were born in Michigan. Please tell us your unique connections to your start in dancing, performing arts, and as an actress in Hollywood in West Side Story with director Robert Wise, who would later go on to direct the first Star Trek feature film. And I understand your father knew Gene Roddenberry.
I always loved to dance from when I was very, very little. I was always moving. Not that children don't, but anyway, my mom followed up with trying to find a dance class for me when I was 4. So anyway, she couldn't. But she convinced the teacher to take me in, and I kept up with the 7-year-olds, 6-year-olds. And so after that, I was determined that I was going to follow this up myself, that I wanted to dance. So when that was in Michigan, we moved to California, to Riverside, and my dad was in the Air Force during World War II. And he was a trainer. Pilot. He trained pilots. And actually, I skipped. But anyway, we moved to California. And in California, in Riverside, I found a dance teacher. My mom found the dance teacher. And I studied with her until I was about 12. And she said, she needs more. she needs much more. And I know of a teacher for her. And she recommended a man by the name of Eugene Loring, who is an incredible, incredible mentor. He was a choreographer himself, and he created a dance studio, and he believed that American dance had to do with all dance. It wasn't just ballet. So at his studio, so I went and auditioned. It was a real audition. I was 12 years old, and he put me under scholarship. And I remained under scholarship until I was 18. And all through high school, we eventually moved to, he was in Hollywood, right on Hollywood Boulevard, at a beautiful old hotel there in the basement. And so I had 15 classes a week, all through high school, all through those 4 years. So I was a very accomplished dancer, as all of his dancers were. And so when I started auditioning, then, I stood out because I knew how to move different ways.
That's so cool.
So that's kind of how that started. Mm-hmm. The connection with Gene Roddenberry was actually through my mom. And she was best friends with Eileen in high school. Eileen Roddenberry, his first wife. And then she met Gene, of course, when they were dating. And they became friends. And I think they lost connection a little bit right at the beginning of the war. And then, interestingly enough, we had been stationed at Riverside Air Force Base, and my mom walked out on the back porch to do her laundry, and Eileen was on the porch next door. So that connection, it reignited the friendship. And they were friends ever since then. I was the first baby between the two couples, and so I was kind of special for both of them. Anyway, so we always knew what Gene was doing. He was either, a pilot, or he was a policeman, or he was writing for the mayor, or he was starting to ghostwrite, or we knew a lot about what he was doing, and we'd visit and they'd visit. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
I called him Uncle Rod.
Oh, did you? That's awesome.
Yeah. He was my uncle.
That's so cool. So it was a really big family thing as a connection. Love that story. Thank you for sharing that with us.
That's so cool. And Carey, seeing that Gene Roddenberry lived next door to you, he probably gave you advice on being an actress in Hollywood. Can you share the best or most memorable information that he told you before or while producing on Star Trek? And can you share that with us?
Actually, he tried to discourage me.
What, really? He discouraged you?
Yeah, he did. He felt that, the climate of the time was young women were preyed upon quite a bit. And so the characteristic of the casting couch was real. It was a real thing. And he would give me talks about it. And he even went so far. My first job was in San Francisco, and the families came up, and he visited, and he contacted the man he was writing for. He was writing 333 Montgomery Street at the time. The gentleman that he was writing about was Jake Ehrlich, and so he asked Jake Ehrlich to talk to me. and Mr. Ehrlich gave me quite a speech about Joan Crawford and all these people who would have rather had a life than had a career. So, in a sense, I think Gene was trying to tell me to get out of the business. But other than that, he didn't really have a lot of sharing to do. He didn't directly try to dissuade me, but he just said, these are the pitfalls, watch out.
Wow, so you ended up not taking his advice. Was there a decision that you made yourself to move forward with acting, dancing, and performing?
I did get discouraged because of the environment. Best friends I had, wouldn't tell me about auditions. I'd go to the audition, accidentally find out about it. And there was my best friend who was my roommate and didn't tell me because I might get the audition and she, I don't know, my temperament or something. I wasn't ready for that. I wanted real friendships and people caring, and not that they didn't, but it was a different kind of care.
Carey, please tell us about your first scene in Star Trek as an Orion serving girl on the original pilot, The Cage. This was back in 1964. Referring to that scene with Captain Pike, it showed him watching Vina, and you were there as well.
Well, I had an agent, and when a call would come out, my agent would call me. And I don't remember, there was no audition, but I was called for Star Trek. So it could have been Gene. I don't know. He never told me. I mean, he was in a sense discouraging, but in another sense, he wasn't. He would write to producers and tell them about me, and which I just found out like last year that he did all that. I had no idea.
Wow.
So the Orion, when I was in Orion, and it was the first of the series, it was a very exciting set. Now, I had done other shows that had costumes like that, because I was in John Goldfarb, Please Come Home, and so there were kind of harem type costumes and dancing. Most of it was improvisation, as I recall. And I don't remember, I mean, there are things I don't remember. I don't remember how many dancers there were. I don't remember the specifics. I just remember Jeffrey Hunter and Susan Oliver and Gene and Herb Solo. And I think we had some pictures taken, some publicity pictures taken. And it was very exciting, but there was some, I know Gene talked to me about the belly button showing on television because there were censorship at the time, where you couldn't show your belly button and things like that. He thought it was ridiculous. So anyway, I think our costume was made so that it had a mesh, so our belly buttons did not show.
Well, you were in the play, and the fact that you had the audition for West Side Story was nice. There are so many familiar people and names in Star Trek's The Cage. Herb Solo comes to mind as someone that was involved. That had to have been a crazy day for you.
Yeah, so that day I was a little stressed because I had a call that night, and I was in Hollywood at Paramount. No, it was on Sepulveda. So I had to go from Sepulveda over the hill into the valley and way into Woodland Hills by 6:30 or something. I was a little late, but I got scolded. But I got to do both.
And we remember the costumes you wore in The Cage. Vina, the lead, was wearing the mesh and the same costume design. Thanks for sharing that, Carey.
Yeah, Carey, there was much more Star Trek for you a little later on. And out of respect for your performance, tell us how this evolved into getting on call sheets for 7 more first season Star Trek original series episodes in 1966 and 1967.
That was a few years later. So it didn't evolve out of The Cage, I don't think. But my agent would get calls about it. Now, who it was that called him from the studio, I have no idea. But it was through my agent. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun to do. They were day jobs. You'd go in for a day, maybe a couple days. And I made friends with the hairdressers and the makeup people. And Gene, on the first time that I was a crew member, he came down to direct how my hair was to look. So he swooped it over. I can't remember which way. He wanted it swooped over and something done. Yeah. So that was Gene.
That's so cool. I think we have a picture of that as well, because I was doing heavy research when writing this, and that's so neat. I was going to ask that too. You read my mind. I was going to say, hey, on these other episodes, did Gene Roddenberry ever talk to you or visit you while you're on the set? And you just answered it. So perfect. Yeah,
he really interacted a lot with it at first. It was his baby. All of this in his imagination. I think about that and how all of these people he was able to inspire and bring about, Star Trek.
Yeah,
and it's still going.
Yes, it's a cultural story, Star Trek, all these years later.
Amazingly enough, I've been found. I would never have thought.
Oh, yes! I distinctly remember you, Carey. In Hollywood, we know actors use a stage name for various reasons, right? Is there a reason or backstory on why you chose Carey Foster as a stage name? Was it given to you by family members? Also, did you come up with the name Olivia Rose for your character in Star Trek?
I did not come up with the name Olivia Rose. So that was given to me, and I didn't even know that was my name until a few years ago.
Really?
So, as to my name, I was a teenager when I I realized that my name didn't have a rhythm to it. And my last name actually was Parmenter. And so Emmy Lou and Parmenter, it was like too heavy. Mm-hmm. It was too much of a mouthful. I loved my friend's name. Her name was Kathy Gale. That was perfect. I would have gone with that.
Yeah.
So in my teenage mind, I really liked the name Carey, but I couldn't find a last name. I couldn't think what my last name should be. And I was doing an industrial show, and the assistant choreographer, Maggie Banks, said, we have to work on your name because Emmy Lou Parmenter, it doesn't quite have a ring. I told her what I thought. I like the name Carey. She says, great. That sounds great. She says, do you have a last name? I said, no. And she said, well, let me think on it. So a few days later, we were on the road, by the way. And a few days later, she said, what about the name Foster? She had been dating someone with the last name Foster. So that's how I got my name, Carey Foster.
In your career, you got to work with a rock and roll legend, Elvis Presley, in the film Kissin' Cousins. Can you tell us what it was like working with him? And how was he as a person? I'm just curious.
He was a very sweet person, a very kind person. He made everyone on the set feel comfortable. And no one was an extra, you could tell, in his mind. He spoke to everybody. He was friendly and outgoing, joked, kind of a warm-hearted guy. He was flirting, and I didn't take it as he was flirting with me specifically, but one of my close friends was dating one of his friends, one of his boys that were around him and lived at his home. And we went there one evening, and they opened the door, and they said, Carey. And then they closed it, and my friend and I were standing there going, what in the heck? So evidently he wanted to meet me socially, right, away from. So that's how that came about. We dated for a few months.
Wow.
And I think he was I think he was involved with Priscilla. So I didn't know that, but I think that's what was happening anyway. And then I met my husband, so.
That's so cool how you and Elvis both worked together and also dated. So, Carey, in your eyes, do Elvis's song lyrics reflect the type of person that he was?
Yeah, I think he was a romantic. The lyrics fit him. I think he was sad, though. I think there was sadness in him.
Absolutely. I don't think anyone can relate to the demands put on Elvis or relate to that at all. Thank you for sharing your perspective with us, Carey.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. And to have private moments, there were always people around, always. So there would always be in his living room a bunch of girls sitting there. And I didn't know who they were, but he would eventually say, okay, everybody out.
Carey, after Star Trek, you were featured in films and television, but mostly as a dancer. Now we know you have a background in dancing, but did you at times feel that you were typecast because of your background?
And did you ever feel like that limited your choices?
Yeah. Well, in those days, dancing was considered an extra. I was a Hollywood gypsy. I mean, I went from show to show, and that's how I made my living. So I never felt that was in the way of acting. And I don't know that any acting jobs I went for, that they necessarily knew I was a dancer. It was kind of two separate worlds. Just get your dance bag and go to the next audition. And for dance. Mm-hmm. For acting, you'd get calls and then you go in and you read for someone or have an interview of some kind.
But would you occasionally run across an audition where there was dancing required coupled with an acting role?
I think there were a few of those with the Elvis movies where there was dancing.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, Hullabaloo and Kissin' Cousins, and I don't know, there were so many.
Carey, can you tell us your favorite or unique memory or a never before heard moment that you remember on Star Trek at Paramount?
I think it's the overall energy that was on the set. It was distinct from other jobs. I was going from job to job, so this was just another job. Do you know what I mean? So it wasn't, at the time, it wasn't necessarily unique, but I did remember thinking, the camaraderie on the set seemed to be, everybody was for this show. Everybody enjoyed doing it. Everybody liked the uniqueness of it. The scripts were interesting. It was a new vision that Gene had created, and I think people really loved it. And that showed behind the cameras, the light people and the sound people and the people doing hair and makeup and costumes. They were all really into it. Mm-hmm. So that to me was the uniqueness of it, was what the moments that I remember.
What did you think about the costume or wardrobe you had with the short miniskirt scant and the high boots at the time in the 60s?
Yeah, I was used to wearing those things. I know some people were offended by it or something. But at the time, it was part of, a dancer's life, tights, leotard, and off you go. I didn't really think of it as anything, except that's what people wore when they were in space. Okay. All right, Gene, I'll go with it.
Yeah, that's another thing that always made it unique to me, especially when I was much younger, absorbing the aesthetic of Star Trek when first seeing the show. Really, it was the costumes. And in addition to what you had wore each week with the mini skirts and boots, specifically yourself, and like you said, I'm sure Gene had a lot to come up with that.
And Gene loved women, so he wanted to show women, right? He did too.
He did, yes.
A captain's log returns in a moment.
Welcome back to A Captain's Log. We're in the middle of an exclusive interview with Carey Foster.
Carey, after your acting career, you took a quieter approach to life, the complete opposite of Hollywood. You went on to study to become a Montessori teacher. What made you want to make that change, and how different is it from traditional teaching?
Well, I moved to New York with my husband, and I was going to do theater, only I got pregnant. And so that kind of decided things. When I got back from New York, we moved back here, and then I did several movies and television things after that. I had my baby with me, and so I was still pursuing dancing and acting. But I got involved in reading. My sister-in-law was involved in getting the Montessori training in Italy. And she gave me some books before she left. And I started reading about the development of the child and early childhood things. And I became fascinated. And then I found out that the woman who was an original Montessorian, Francesca Claremont, had a course in Santa Monica. And I thought, wow, that would be nice to really study the child, because I want to see how my child grows. I want to understand this.
Yeah.
And so that kind of became a passion. And so I thought, well, I'll just take the year and go do that. And it doesn't mean that that's what I'm going to do, because I didn't intend that was what I was going to do. It just kind of what I ended up doing. So I took the course and I just became totally immersed. And how is it different? Well, I'm still teaching.
You are.
At
That's
almost
awesome.
80 years old. Yeah. And I love it. Okay. So I'm not burned out, because it's a different philosophy. It's a different way of looking at the child. Mm-hmm. And I would say, let's see, in Montessori, we look at the child as a discoverer of their world, like early people, right? Mm-hmm. Early man had to be like a child. And so we take the child on a discovery. We prepare the environment. In the primary, it has sensorial materials. So they learn square, triangle. They learn names of things. They learn about their culture. They learn how to wash tables and chairs and whatever. And so they learn the world. In the elementary, they learn the universe, and you open their minds to the whole universe, to everything. Early people, how did man get here? I get these questions all the time. And then you, after the teacher, the guide, has inspired the child, you follow them. Where do they want to go? Oh, in the primary, they're interested in shapes. Let's learn about shapes. So that it's not taxing the child. I'm not teaching them. I'm guiding them if you think about it, a baby learns to walk and learns to talk without any instruction.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So
what are we doing? We don't have to instruct all the time. We have to guide. We have to prepare an environment, place things in it. The child is curious and they're going to learn. And that's what so it's totally inspired. I love it.
Was this a career goal or something that you had planned out to be working with kids?
I think it evolved. I love children. I do. And they love me. So I love to teach dance to them. I'm a child too. And so it sort of was something that evolved. I just followed what I loved. And since, could I have gone further with my career? Did I have any regrets? There were moments of that when I saw friends of mine accomplishing things, right, in the theater and movies and television. I know that I could have had I been tenacious enough and wanted it enough and had the right personality. I could have, but I just didn't. So I'm here and I'm fine. I'm happy.
Absolutely. We're happy you're here. This is great.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, we're so glad you're here after such a long career teaching dance and living life to the fullest. Last question for you, Carey. Is there a moment in your Hollywood career that you want to share that you can hang your hat on? Or we would love for you to share a quick moment that perhaps fell under the radar.
Just follow your heart.
Thank you for being a guest on A Captain's Log, Carey. You are a truly gifted and kind person.
Yes, thank you so much, Carey. Trekkies, remember to please record or watch us on your local broadcast TV station or Roku channel. And of course, A Captain's Log is available on our YouTube channel under A Captain's Log Show. Bye for now.
Hello, happy, my old friend. I'm glad you've manifested yourself into a human I can depend on to bring me happy.